Good evening and welcome to our Thursday night series called Wisdom in Action. And tonight's topic will be on scrubbing the soul. How often do I scrub my soul? My name is Rona Schweitz and I am based at the Manhattan Center of the Brahma Kumaris. Been meditating with the Brahma Kumaris for 25 plus years. And the background is in medicine. Studied in Rotterdam in Holland and practiced medicine for about 15 years, whilst also being an avid meditator. But over time, it became very clear to me that the real suffering of human beings was not so much at a physical level, but much more at a mental and emotional, and even further at a spiritual level. And so my involvement in the activities of the Brahma Kumaris became more and more and more and more, and at some stage went to a country where it was not possible to practice medicine with my diploma. And so I kind of got more and more involved in the activities of the Brahma Kumaris and haven't been practicing medicine for the past 15 years or so. But still very, very much fascinated with the functioning of the body as such, and in a bigger context, very much fascinated by the laws and the dynamics of nature and health and the forces that generate illness. But also very, very much aware of the big part, the big influence our mind has on the body, and very much aware on how much we could still do at the level of consciousness that would benefit the physical health. And so today's talk, we would like to explore those dynamics a little bit, and at least for it to be an invitation for you to explore with it at your own individual level. Now, it doesn't need much depth of thinking to realize that a system of health in which we ignore the heart, a system, if we create a system and a way of thinking and a structure that looks after health of the body, in which we ignore the heart, it doesn't need much intelligence to realize that that system will be flawed, that system will create problems, or that system will be a failure. It is common sense that if we want to address health and well-being at a physical level, we need to take the whole body into consideration. Now, with our present medical system and advancements in medical science, there was a time when there was a lot of hope and almost like a sense of victory. There was a time that we thought that we could eradicate all illnesses, that we could create a state of total health and well-being for everyone on the planet. There was this hope, there was this striving, and there was even the belief that this was possible with the present system and the technological advancements. But the reality is that at present, and definitely at present with the pandemic going on globally, we are again very much becoming aware of the fact that our system has still many areas that we are not clear about yet. That there may be many areas that we still need to discover, but also maybe that there are areas that we are overlooking things. And when we approach it from a slightly different angle, when we approach it from a philosophical perspective or even from a spiritual perspective, and look, for example, at this phenomena of pain. Pain is or can be understood as a message. For example, if you sit in the wrong, if the body sits in the wrong posture, then after a while there is pain. If you take your foot and you put it in, in your neck, might not even reach. But the pain, the hamstrings will tell you, and maybe pain elsewhere also, will tell you that that might not be such a good idea. And so what these simple examples tell us is, if we choose a wrong posture for the body, there will be pain. And that pain in itself is the message. Now, the solution is not to take painkillers, but leave the wrong posture. We can do that, but then over time, pain will become worse and worse and will create other problems also, which create more pain. And we can take more and more and more and more and more painkillers without addressing the root problem, which in this case, in this example, was a wrong posture. So just addressing pain and trying to make the pain go away or cover up the symptoms doesn't solve the deeper problem. And it actually may deceive us and deceive us thinking that everything is okay and we will be okay. But a problem continues. It's just masked, it's just covered by the painkillers. It would be like if there is a fire somewhere and the fire alarm goes off, and you put off the fire alarm in an intent, trying to, in an intent, and then thinking that the fire will be put off just by you putting off the fire alarm. But the fire will go on. And so in the same way, when we think of health and when we think of physical illness, then maybe we should also look broader and see illness itself as a message. Illness itself as a message that there is something wrong at a deeper level that we have not addressed or that we are not taking into consideration. And that does not mean that you do not address the illness, that you do not address the symptoms, that you do not address the pain. No, and when there is a fire and there is a fire alarm, of course, you can also take off the fire alarm. But you also have to address the fire. Otherwise, the whole thing will still be destroyed. So in the same way, paying attention to the illness and doing what needs to be done at that level, fine. But maybe we should also look at a deeper level. Now, and this is where this mind-body connection comes in, where this whole function of the psyche and our psychic functions in terms of cognition and sense, our attitude and our consciousness comes in. If we ignore that part, the part of our thinking, the part of our perceptions, the part of our feelings and emotions, when we think of health, then it is like as if we are ignoring the heart, creating a system of health of the body, ignoring the heart. If we are ignoring the consciousness, if we are ignoring the being in our understanding of health and illness, we are maybe even ignoring a root, maybe even the root and the seed. And this is why it seems to elude us all the time, total health. And all our brilliant scientists and researchers and medical experts and all their efforts and so much financial effort also goes in all the research that is going on and all the facilities that are created. But still, human beings do not feel necessarily more healthy now than 50 years ago or 100 years ago. Actually, we need more hospitals, we need more ambulances, we need more doctors, we need more nurses, we need more medical personnel and other health professionals. And now with the present COVID-19 pandemic going on, even more so. And when it is in such an urgent and dominant state, it absorbs completely all the attention, which is understandable. But shouldn't we also look at the fire that is burning underneath? And this is where spirituality comes in and address the things that are urgent and address the things that are ongoing. But also we would need to become more aware and address the deeper issues behind that cause this illness. Even if we take something like COVID-19 and the coronavirus, why does it affect some people and others not? First, we thought it was the elderly and those who have a weakened immune system for whatever reason. But then we saw that others are also affected who are young and apparently healthy, and even children are affected. And why are some affected and why are others not? Why in some cases it spread, in other cases it doesn't. So there are deeper factors, maybe at a physical level, but maybe also at the level of consciousness. And this is where we want to focus on in our talk today. What could be our mental posture that promotes health? What can be our emotional posture that promotes health? What can be our spiritual posture that promotes health? And we can work on both ends. And maybe we should preferably do work on both ends. Because if we only pay attention to one end, sooner or later, something else will come up. And this is what we observe. And I think most medical professionals will agree with that. But from my own personal practice, what you see is someone comes with a certain health issue and they get cured. But if you see them after a year or so, then something else is there. And you address that. And then after a while, something else comes up. And many of the patients you see over time have similar situations or things develop into something chronic. Now, what spirituality suggests is that we should also address the dynamics in the mind, the dynamics at the level of consciousness, the dynamics at the level of our attitude and our vision and our perception and our model of life in general. The nature's ways are, for a big part, still not fully known to mankind. And one of the things that human beings cannot change is that we are not absolved from the laws of nature. Now, we like to think we are, and we like to think we can change nature or be above the laws of nature. But nature has certain laws, and human beings are subservient to those laws. And so instead of trying to change them, let us start working against, aligned, in alignment with those laws of nature. Then nature might serve us. And so to say that in a simplified way, we have this, how to call this mechanism that is called body, which is a fascinating thing, the body. You know, if you cut it, it just heals. And there are so many, the heart, it pumps, the breath, the physiology of all the systems and how it balances all the organs and whatever needs to be excreted, what can be taken in. It is a fascinating system. And nature gives us this body to use. But if we use it in a wrong way, it will break. It will not cooperate in the same way, much in the same way, like, for example, a vehicle, a car. A car is also a very interesting machine, you could say. And I don't have much knowledge about the technology of a car, but it is an interesting piece of, what would we say, product of technology. But it has its manual. And if we use the car according to its manual, the car will serve us excellently. We can do all kinds of things with a car, and we can travel tremendous distances with a car. But there are certain things we should not do with a car. Because if we do those things, then the car will break down. And that is described in the manual, and it is understood. For example, I can't go and take the car for a swim in the Hudson River. Well, I can try, but I won't reach very far, and the car won't function afterwards. So there are certain laws and structures and rules and regulations by which you have to operate to get the best out of your car. If we take that similar approach towards the body is much more intricate, and there are many more mechanisms and dynamics going on in the body, but maybe it abides by the same simple laws. Nature has given us this body for certain things and not for other things. And if we use this body for those other things in a way that is against the rules and the guidelines and the manual for the body, then the body will give problems and will not cooperate with us. Now, in the bigger scheme of things, I would like to do a little drawing here. Just one simple thing that may already help us into a more complete and a more holistic understanding of health is if we do not think of ourselves only in terms of a body, but to think of ourselves and to think in terms of health and illness also in the context of a being. Not this word human being that we use. Human is the body, the physical part, but the being of consciousness or the soul, this is a bit more complete view and a bit more complete understanding of who we truly are. And it doesn't need it is not rocket science to begin to understand that if something is wrong at this level, it might definitely influence here. And maybe even something wrong at this level, influencing here. Now, what would be a wrong posture of the soul? No, wrong posture of the body, we understand. Say you bend your back and you walk like this all the time. It will start giving problems in the back. Now, if you are not having the shoulders straight, it creates all kinds of tensions in this area. And when you correct the posture, it gives relief. But we also are very much aware that stress and the experience of anxiety also affects the muscle tension. Now, what kind of mental posture creates anxiety? What kind of mental posture creates stress? What kind of mental posture creates unpleasant or negative emotions that can have their effects on the body? Something like fear, for example. We know that if there is fear of some dog is there and it's showing you them show you their teeth and start barking aggressively, your heart will start palpitating and you will want to run, and maybe even perspiration comes and the blood pressure goes up. So it is this emotion of fear that has the physical response. Now, what is that posture of the being that creates fear? What is that posture of the being that creates stress and anxiety or depression or hopelessness or lethargy or even what would be certain meanness and certain anger and even certain tendencies towards wanting to hurt and wanting to destroy? What is that mental posture that create those emotions that ultimately also affect the body? So how can we put in place a structure that helps the health of the soul? Now, the title of today's lecture is Scrubbing the Soul. What is the hygiene of the soul? We all have our guidelines of washing our hands often, and especially if you have gone out and touching, how often do you scrub your hands and not let your hands touch your face? Wear a mask in public or when you're with others around. Do we have those precautions also for the soul? Do we even know what those things would be for the soul? Now, one area that causes a lot of anxiety and a lot of stress and insecurity is the area of attachments. When we talk about attitude, attitude is a function of the soul. Attitude is a function of consciousness. Attitude is not a function of the body or the cheeks or the muscles. It is a function of the inner being. Now, wrong posture of the soul, one area that it manifests is in attitude. Attitude towards things. And we, at present, we have created a culture worldwide that promotes attachments. We have created worldwide a culture that promotes desires. We have created worldwide a way of life and a lifestyle that generates expectations. We have created worldwide a kind of a culture that revolves around two words, I and mine. And with that, we have narrowed our world, you could say. Our thoughts and our feelings and our thinking revolves around I, me, and mine. And even that mine and that me is very limited. Because that I in itself usually is only focused on the body. When we think of ourselves, most of the time, if not almost all the time, we think of ourselves in terms of our physical form and in terms of our positions, possessions, and the people around us. But from a spiritual angle, that is a very limited perspective. Is that the real self? All of that can change anytime. Even this body can change anytime. Isn't the real self something, someone much more durable, someone timeless? And this is where the being comes in. So when I think of I, do I think of the self as a spiritual being? A being that transcends the limitations of the body, transcends the limitations of position and possession, and even transcends the beginning or end of the physical interactions that I have. A spiritual being, a being of consciousness, a traveler through time and space. Maybe that is a mental posture and a mental sense of identity that is more in line with truth and more in line with nature and more healthy. Because if I could think of myself as a timeless being of light, then lots of the desires and lots of the anxieties and insecurities would fall away. And if we look at history, if we look at far history, but also recent history, people who have done great things, people who have done extraordinary things, people who have lived extraordinary lives. If I, for example, remember the prophet souls of all the religions, but also throughout the ages, the saints and the sages and the great politicians and the great philosophers and the great scientists and the great artists, people who have done extraordinary things also at social level, Martin Luther King or Nelson Mandela or Mother Teresa or Gandhi. They were people who were fearless. Fearless even to the extent of fearless in situations where they could be facing death of this physical body. They were people who could bring about certain miracles in certain areas. And a deeper sense of well-being that transcends just physical health. And there may have been physical health issues, but that was never suppressing or oppressing their life's purpose and their greatness of whatever it is that they did. And so that spiritual posture of health has a lot to do with fearlessness, has a lot to do with freedom from being bogged down by burdens and anxieties and expectations and insecurities. Also, it has to do with a sense of selflessness, using life and using the body for the benefit and well-being for the group or for the bigger society, even at the risk of death or criticism and violence, because of that nature of fearlessness and a certain commitment to what is understood to be truth and what is understood to be justice. And so that kind of spirit comes from an attitude of brotherhood, and an attitude of brotherhood that transcends blood brothers, but an attitude of seeing all souls, all living beings as my brothers. And so if we use our life and if we use our time and if we use our body with that kind of attitude, then nature will say that is in alignment with what I meant bodies to be used for. And maybe that is a much more healthier inner positioning. And the body will respond to those healthy emotions of brotherhood, of fearlessness, of feeling secure, of courage and enthusiasm. Body responds to that with cooperation and health. But if we use our lives and our time and our body and our physical energy for indulgences and for selfless, petty actions, selfish, petty actions, why should nature in the long term continue to cooperate with us? Nature might say, that is not what I gave you this body for. You have this body on loan for X amount of years. And nature might say, no, that was not it. For that also, we need a bigger picture of nature itself, and to understand that there is an underlining force in nature towards balance. And you can see that on all levels when you observe the physical universe. Nature and the physical universe have all kinds of forces that ultimately balance themselves out. And so nature tries to heal that what is broken. Now, that is why when you cut, skin heals. When you throw an object in the air, forces of nature bring it back to the ground, where there is balancing forces acting on it. Now, if there is a fire, you put your hand in fire, then that pain will tell you, you're moving out of what is beneficial. You're bringing danger to yourself. And that pain is giving me a signal. Now, in this friendly nature that tries to give us the best, there are calamities and there is illness. But that may be because we're not seeing the bigger picture of nature. There are forces of generation, there are forces of sustaining, and there are forces of destruction. But the forces of destruction are balanced with the forces of generating or of creating. And that yields sustenance. No? To give a simple example, this skin, lot of cells are being created at this moment, but also cells are being destroyed at the same time, so that there is sustenance of the skin. And nature works like this. So when we see the destructive side of nature in the form of illness or whatever form, maybe it is because we are not seeing the creative side of nature, what is being happening, and it's trying to balance us. And so when there are lots of what is it? When there is lots of stress, when there are experiences of discomfort, when there are difficult situations, when there are calamities coming towards us, maybe it is because nature is trying to push us into a certain direction to explore deeper factors and put it right at a deeper level. Now, for example, we had touched on this whole idea of attachments. We have created a lifestyle and a society and a world culture where getting attached is not only seen as normal, but it is also being promoted. And it is seen as successful, and it is seen as good, and it is even seen as love, and it is even further seen as true love. Now, if that were true, then why relationships, interactions, dynamics where attachments are involved are so painful? Why, even though we might be, if it is in connection with a person, if there is attachment with a person, even if that person is right here, we can still be insecure. Because of that attachment and that emotional dependency, there is insecurity and anxiety, because tomorrow that person may not be here. Now, and all that anxiety and all that insecurity generates all kinds of other emotions and creates all kinds of chemical reactions in the body that may not be so healthy at the body level. But it is also not healthy for the soul. And this attitude of generating attachments, creating an experience of pain, creating an experience of discomfort, creating an experience of sadness and depression, or maybe even misery, it is telling us position yourself differently. Now, can we position ourselves in a non-attached way? Why not? Maybe that is really much more closer to love. And maybe that is what we were meant to be. experiencing. And maybe that was what we were meant to be using the body for. Non-attached doesn't mean I'm not involved. And non-attached doesn't mean I don't love and appreciate and care and respect. It just means I'm not emotionally dependent. It just means I am okay, I am at ease, I am in peace, and I enjoy the company. But if company is not there, I am still okay. And that may even be a much better way to be in interaction and in relationship. Because then there are no expectations and desires and demands. There is not a noose around the neck of someone else that you have to make me happy. You have to be here, otherwise I am depressed. They say this whole area of attachment or non-attachment is birds. And because sometimes people say, yes, but the other makes me complete. Or this thing makes me feel complete. When I have this or when I have this job, it makes me feel independent and it makes me feel complete. Or this person makes me whole. So then we are taking the position that we are innately not whole, that we are innately lacking or incomplete. And that we need something else or someone else to be whole. If that is our perspective on self and on life, we will always be in stress. We will always have some form of fear and insecurity. There will always be a lack of self-respect. But it is like a bird. What is beautiful? A bird has two wings. And a bird can be on the ground and walk. A bird can be with other birds and walks. And a bird can fly and enjoy the sky. And a bird can fly with other birds and enjoy the flock and the sky. But if the bird has one wing and says, I need another bird to fly, and that other bird also has one wing, with one wing, we just flap around and flap in circles. And two birds with one wing will still be two birds flapping around in circles. But if one bird can spread both wings and can fly and enjoy the flight and enjoy the both wings, and both birds can fly together. One can fly alone, the other can fly alone and enjoy. And they can fly together, but as complete beings. Now, in life, and we have created this mental posture, this mental attitude of looking and thinking of ourselves as incomplete beings, as basically and innately lacking. And maybe that is the virus that is ravaging our souls. And that is widespread. And that has been going on for a very, 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 very long time. And so maybe we should scrub the soul very regularly to get rid of this virus of thinking of ourselves as incomplete beings and restoring the vision and the perspective of ourselves as spiritual beings, maybe even as angelic beings, allowing that angel within to emerge and spread the wings, and coming out of that limited perspective and limited vision of ourselves. And that scrubbing is also done in a different way. The medicine that you take for that is, first of all, you take spiritual knowledge, and the experience and the practice of that spiritual knowledge. And to simplify this, one simple way to think of this is to understand the self as a spiritual being of light, operating from the center of the forehead, operating from behind the eyes, a being of consciousness, a being that is timeless and different from the body, and also different from the limitations of the body. A being that is innately divine, a being that has higher potential and divine potential. And this being, the soul, is for a temporary period using this body. It is like the being, the real self, the soul, is like the driver of this body, is a visitor in this body and a visitor in this physical world. The soul comes from another dimension of consciousness, the invisible dimension of silence, of light, of beyond time and beyond change. The invisible, immortal, living star is like a traveler and belongs to a family of travelers, a family of beings of light. That consciousness would bring the attitude of brotherhood. That consciousness would bring the attitude of a deep bond of love that is beyond the physical, that is beyond gender, that is beyond the color of skin, that is beyond religion and culture or political affiliation. It is a love of soul to soul. Now, becoming aware of these spiritual truths, reflecting on them, contemplating on them, experimenting and experiencing that type of consciousness, of brotherhood, of soul consciousness, of guest consciousness, of brotherly consciousness, that kind of posture, and then see how we feel. And if there is a deeper sense of peace and appreciation and an attitude of gratitude and a deeper sense of contentment and a clean form of love and a deeper sense of enthusiasm, those are healthy attitudes, those are healthy feelings and emotions. And that will influence this body very differently than an attitude of hate and violence and anger and greed and arrogance and all the complications that come from that. Spiritual knowledge also gives us the opportunity to experience, to perceive the presence of the Supreme Being, who is like eternal parent of the soul, and to experience those relationships of pure friendship, pure companionship at a soul to soul level, at a soul to supreme soul level. Maybe that is health at the level of consciousness and health at the level of the soul. And maybe that is the soap and the scrubbing that we should regularly be using to clean out our inner world. And I'm convinced that will reflect at the level of matter and at the level of physical health also. At least it would help tremendously. So how can you do this for yourself? First of all, kind of make a commitment for yourself to reflect more deeply on spiritual truths. Take up a practice of exposing yourself to deeper spiritual knowledge. Make it a regular practice to meditate. Identify certain spiritual principles and apply them in your life. Now, one principle, for example, is the principle of peace and non-violence. And translate that in a lifestyle of absolute non-violence. That means at the level of thoughts, good wishes for everyone. Seeing everyone as my spiritual brother. And so having good wishes for everyone. At the level of words, no cursing. Let whatever come out of the mouth be like a flower and a balm for others. At the level of actions, let your actions always be cooperative for the benefit of all involved. A vegetarian lifestyle or a vegan lifestyle in terms of nutrition is also one way that manifests a more healthy inner attitude of non-violence. And the body will align with that. The body will be used in alignment of the forces of goodness, and nature reacts well to that. So in many, many different simple ways, you can start experimenting with your spiritual health. And that is like preventive and long-term work on health, because it will definitely help the health of the physical body also. But I know this is a journey, even a journey to wake up to this bigger truth. So enjoy your journey into spiritual health, and then see how that works out also and influences also at the level of the body. So let us close with some few moments of meditation. As we sit comfortably, let the body relax. Let the breathing become deep and more slow. Just take few minutes and allow the mind to settle and allow the body also to completely relax. And in that relaxation of the body, it becomes easy to become aware of the fact that there is one who is experiencing the body. There is one who is experiencing whether there is tension or relaxations of the muscles. And that is not the body itself. It is the inner being, higher being, the soul. And making the soul relaxed means to be wise. Know the true self as this being of consciousness. Know the self as an immortal, timeless being of light. And the physical world is an extra gift. But the soul exists regardless of whatever happens to the body or whatever happens in the physical world. In this awareness, it becomes obvious that there is no need for ego or attachments. The soul is beautiful. And timeless. A being with divine origins. A being of peace. And this body is an extra gift. The whole drama of life is a journey. But the soul has an eternal home, eternal family, an eternal parent. And life is just an extra experience. And as we go through the rest of the journey, let us aim to stay awake and promote health at all levels. Thank you. Have a good evening.